By the time I turned onto my parents' street that Thanksgiving, my chest had already started doing that old familiar thing. Not pain exactly, just pressure. A quiet tightening, like my body knew the address before the rest of me was willing to admit what it meant. Their block was lined with cars. Fold-out chairs were visible through the front window. Football flashed blue and white across the TV inside. From the driveway, the house looked warm, crowded, normal. That was the trick it had always done best. I sat in my car a second longer than I needed to. One hand still on the wheel, the pumpkin pie cooling in the passenger seat beside 2 bottles of seltzer. I had brought the pie because I always brought something. I had brought the seltzer because my mother said they were out. And I had come at all because some part of me, stubborn or stupid or hopeful, still wanted to believe this holiday might go differently. My name is Eli Mercer. I'm 31, and I work as a sports physical therapist at a rehab clinic about 20 minutes away. My life is not flashy. It is steady. I help people get back on their feet for a living, which may be why it took me too long to notice how many people in my own family had gotten comfortable leaning on me without ever asking what it cost. Inside, the house smelled like turkey, butter, and sweet potatoes. My father, Russell, sat in the living room pretending to watch football. My mother, Janice, moved dishes around with the tight energy of a woman trying to keep the day from telling the truth. My older brother, Darren, stood near the kitchen island with his wife, Kelsey, who somehow always looked polished, even when money was tight. Then I saw the first sign. My father picked up an envelope from the counter, slid it open, and frowned before folding it too fast. Past due notice, I thought immediately. My mother caught me looking and said, "Don't start today." Kelsey set her keys down beside the deviled eggs. The oversized SUV fob flashed under the kitchen light like it belonged in a different financial reality than the one everyone kept calling temporary. Darren laughed at something that was not funny enough to earn it. I carried the pie into the kitchen and set it beside the rolls. I had paid emergency bills in that house before. A heating repair one winter, a prescription another month. Part of the mortgage more than once when things got temporarily tight. I had also done the quieter things nobody thanked you for. Printed budget sheets, listed cheaper options, written down hardship numbers, and lower payment plans my father never used because, as he liked to say, he didn't need to be handled like a man who couldn't keep his own roof over his head. That was the thing about my father. He would rather drown standing up than be seen reaching for the rail. I took off my coat, nodded at a couple of cousins, and reached for the seltzer. Before I could even put it in the fridge, I heard my father say my name in a voice that was not a greeting. And standing there with that cold bottle in my hand, I felt the whole room tilt before anything had even happened. What exactly was he about to ask me for in front of everyone? This story was created by the author behind Revenge Pulse. It is a fictional work shaped from familiar family tensions to explore the emotional truths they can leave behind. Nobody in a family calls it dependence while it's happening. They call it a rough month, a timing issue, a favor. Then one day you look up and realize temporary has been living in the house longer than some of the furniture. The first time I covered part of the mortgage, my father called it a timing issue. Just enough to avoid a late fee. I sent the money before lunch and told myself that was what decent sons did. Then the furnace went out in January, right when the cold had teeth. I paid for that too, because I wasn't going to let my mother sit in that house under blankets while my father paced around talking about pride and bad luck. After that, the ass stopped sounding like emergencies and started sounding routine. My mother's prescription, part of the homeowner's insurance, groceries when the month ran long, always wrapped in the same language. Just this once. Just until next month. Just until things settle down. What stayed with me was that I had not only offered money, I had offered fixes, budgets, cheaper options, a hardship number my father refused to call, more work for Darren, a smaller car for Kelsey, rent out the basement. I had handed them answers they did not want because answers come with sacrifice. My father rejected every word. He said he was not some man begging strangers to stay in his own home. He said he did not need his son teaching him how to live. My mother always stepped in the same way. Don't make this bigger than it is. Darren went quiet. Kelsey got righteous. Family shows up when it matters. Months earlier, during one real emergency, I had let my father attach a backup payment method tied to me just in case. Temporary, he said. I believed him. Standing in that kitchen, I knew one thing with perfect clarity. If my father brought up the mortgage in front of everybody that night, I was not going to make it easy for him again. My father waited until the house was full enough to make it count. Not at the door, not in the driveway, not in the 10 quiet minutes before dinner. When a man still has room to pretend he wants peace, he did it between the kitchen and the dining room, while people were reaching for rolls and trying not to spill gravy on paper plates. Close enough for the family to hear. Close enough for everyone else, too. Mortgage is due next week, he said. Like he was mentioning the weather. I kept my voice even. I'm not putting more money into it this month. His face changed instantly. He stepped in too close and pressed one finger into the center of my chest. Either pay the mortgage or get out. Everything stopped. A fork hit a plate and did not hit again. On the TV, players kept running in silence while nobody watched. One of my aunts dropped her eyes so fast it almost looked practiced. A little cousin near the table whispered, "Is Uncle Eli leaving?" and his mother shushed him without looking up. That was the part that hurt. Not the money, not even the threat. The audience. Kelsey stood with that polished little smile she used whenever she wanted cruelty to sound reasonable. Funny how boundaries show up when it's finally your turn to help. Darren stayed by the island, staring somewhere past my shoulder like if he did not look directly at me, it would not count as betrayal. My father kept going. Said this house could not keep carrying somebody who only knew how to calculate. Said all the times I had helped before, like they proved I owed more. Not that I had already done enough. I looked around the room and saw it clearly. Nobody was coming toward me. Nobody was going to stop this. So I went upstairs to my old room, pulled a duffel from the closet, and packed what mattered. Keys, charger, toothbrush, the blood pressure medicine I kept there in case my mother ran out. When I came back downstairs, the pie I had brought was still sitting untouched beside the rolls. My mother looked at me and said it softly, almost offended by the timing of my pain. "Don't ruin Thanksgiving," like I was the one doing it. I walked out with my bag, got in my car, and sat there with both hands on the wheel. For the first time in years, I knew I was done saving them the old way. I drove home on instinct, not thought. The roads were still thick with holiday traffic, but inside the car, it was dead quiet, like sound itself had stepped aside to give humiliation room to breathe. My phone started vibrating before I hit the second light. Then again, I did not check it. I already knew the order. My mother first, offended on behalf of the evening. Kelsey after that, sharp and superior. Then the family group chat. Silent just long enough to feel cowardly before it turned all at once. By the time I got to my apartment, the screen was lit with exactly that. My mother, "You embarrassed your father." Kelsey unreal. On Thanksgiving. Then the group thread. A cousin with a weak little, "Let's all calm down." My mother with, "We were all under stress." Kelsey adding, "Some people don't know how to handle family pressure with grace." I set the phone face down on the table and did not answer a word. I was still wearing my coat when I opened the file cabinet and pulled my laptop toward me. No pacing, no speech. I went straight to the things that did not care who had raised their voice first. Zelle history, transfer records, old emails, insurance notices, card statements, every just this once that had somehow learned how to stay. Then I opened the documents I had sent my father over the past year. Hardship numbers, refinance options, a rough estimate for renting out the basement, a page of cuts he had never even acknowledged. That was when the shape of it sharpened. I had not just been used for money. I had been used as a cushion. My help had made it possible for everyone else to keep pretending there was no real problem to solve. Then a few automatic charges caught my eye. Familiar. Small enough to disappear into the noise if you were not looking for them. Insurance, a late fee. A house-related pull that should have been gone from my accounts months ago. I leaned closer to the screen. And as I traced one payment into the next, I realized my name had never really been out of that house at all. My phone started before the sun was fully up. Like that house had decided not to let me have one clean morning after what happened. My father called first. I let it ring twice. then answered just to hear what version of the truth he planned to sell me. He went straight to command. Don't blow this up over one argument. Not apology, not explanation, just irritation that I had not already folded. When I said nothing, he added, "You were emotional? Let's not make a bigger mess out of it." My mother came next. Softer and somehow worse. She wanted me to come by, smooth things over, say something respectful so the holiday would not sit badly with the family. That was her gift. She could take a wound and describe it like a wrinkle in the tablecloth. Then Kelsey sent a voice memo. I played enough to regret it. People were talking. I had embarrassed everyone. Grown men did not storm out of Thanksgiving because their feelings got hurt. Not one word about what had been said to me. Only how it had looked for them. Darren finally texted near 9. Dad was upset. You know how he gets. I stared at those 2 lines longer than they deserved. Even now, nobody had asked if I was okay. That settled something in me. I went back to the records and called the mortgage servicer. I asked careful questions and kept my voice level. Current status, amount past due, notices sent, backup payment methods, anything tied to my name, my cards, my old authorizations. While I waited on hold, I built a folder on the table beside me. Transfers, insurance payments, old emails, budget plans. Every piece of proof that this had never been about one bad month. This was not a misunderstanding. It was a system. Then the woman on the line confirmed enough to make the room go still around me. That house had stayed afloat longer than I knew, because a backup payment method still tied to me had been catching pieces of the fall. The woman on the phone introduced herself as Maya Bennett, and within 30 seconds, I trusted her more than I trusted half my family. Not because she was warm. She was not. She was clear. She pulled up the account, verified what she could, and explained the problem in plain English. The mortgage was further behind than my parents had admitted. Several notices had gone out, and an old backup payment method tied to me was still active. I asked her to repeat that part. She did. It was not covering the full mortgage every month. It was worse than that. Whenever the account came up short, pieces of the fall were landing on me instead. A homeowner's insurance payment here, a late fee there, a shortfall that should have hit them harder than it did. I thanked her, ended the call, and sat there. Because all at once the whole thing changed shape. My father had stood in that packed house, pointed at my chest, and told me to pay the mortgage or get out. All while my money was still helping hold his roof up. Every vague answer, every avoided detail, every just this month, Kelsey's polished little comments, Darren's silence. It all looked different now. I printed everything, payment traces, insurance records, old emails, the budget pages they ignored, the hardship numbers I had already handed them. Then I wrote 1 page of my own. No more money, no more backup payment access, no more charges tied to me in any form. Then I printed 1 more sheet. Real options, hardship review, repayment plan, refinance, sell the SUV, rent the basement. Darren picks up more work. I was not going back to destroy them. I was going back to turn the lights on. I went back the next afternoon, when the leftovers were still in the fridge and the house had that stale feeling people get after they have behaved badly and slept on it. Only the 4 of them were there. My father at the table, my mother at the sink, wiping a counter that was already clean, Darren by the window, Kelsey on her phone until I walked in and dropped the folder on the table hard enough to cut through the room. I did not sit. I opened the folder and went page by page. Mortgage help, furnace repair, medication, insurance. Then the fixes they had ignored, budget plans, hardship numbers, refinance options, basement rental estimates. Cuts they could have made before things got this bad. My father tried to interrupt. You came here to shame me? I looked at him. No, you shamed me yesterday. I came here because you threw me out of a house that was still leaning on me. That landed. My mother went pale at the insurance records. Kelsey crossed her arms. So you keep receipts on family now? No? I said. I checked my accounts and found your house living in them. That shut her up. Then I laid out the part that changed the room. The backup payment method tied to me was still active, not enough to cover everything. Enough to catch the misses, a late fee, an insurance payment, shortfalls that should have hit them harder than they did. Darren stepped closer. Dad didn't know it was still connected. I slid the dates toward him. The repeated pulls, the notices, the timeline. He stopped talking and started reading. Then I pushed the last sheet across the table. Hardship review, repayment plan, refinance, sell the SUV, rent the basement, more work, actual cuts. I'm not asking for the old money back. I said, but you are not going to keep this house standing through me without my knowledge anymore. My father stared at the papers, then asked, in a voice thinner than I had ever heard from him, if you pull your name out, what happens to the house? I held his eyes. Then for the first time in a long time, it has to stand on the truth. I kept my voice level because the facts were already doing enough damage. If I remove the backup payment access and nobody deals with the arrears, this gets worse fast. I said, that's not a threat. That's math. Nobody liked that sentence. So I gave them the exits one by one. Hardship review, repayment plan, refinance if they still qualified, rent the basement, cut the spending that was making everything worse, sell the SUV. Darren picks up extra shifts. My father hated every option equally, which told me he hated reality more than anyone's sacrifice. My mother looked scared in a quieter way. Kelsey snapped the moment I mentioned the car. That vehicle is not the issue. It is, if you can't afford the house and the image at the same time. That shut the room down. Then my father turned to Darren. How much can you cover? He asked Darren. And don't tell me you can't. He's been carrying this long enough. I watched my brother's face change. For the first time, the weight moved toward him instead of around him. I left the contact sheet on the table with deadlines written beside each option. I'm not staying to debate this all week, I said, picking up my coat. You told me to pay the mortgage or get out. What you never understood is that I was never standing in this house with you. I was holding it up. I got to the front door before I heard it. Eli? Darren's voice. No shrug in it. No excuse. Just my name. I stopped. But I didn't turn around. A few weeks later, the house was still standing. That mattered more than I expected. Not because I missed it, but because it proved something. The place had not collapsed the second I stopped being its hidden support beam. It just had to start telling the truth about what it needed. My father finally made the calls he had spent months avoiding. Hardship review, payment plan, real conversations with the lender instead of pride dressed up as delay. Kelsey lost the SUV by the third week. The replacement was smaller, older, and looked like reality had picked it out for her. Darren picked up extra shifts. Then one night he texted me, I see more now than I let myself see then. I shouldn't have stood there like that. I read it twice and did not answer. A few days later, I stopped by the house to drop off mail that was still going to my old room. Through the kitchen doorway, I saw my father alone at the table with a stack of lender letters spread in front of him. No anger, no audience, just a man and the cost of what he had refused to face. He looked older like that, not weaker, just smaller. I left the mail by the door and walked out without saying a word. That night, I looked at Darren's text again, then set my phone face down. Some doors do not slam shut. They just stop standing open. My new place was smaller than my parents' house, but it felt larger in every way that mattered. More light, less noise. No stack of unopened envelopes on the counter pretending not to mean anything. No silence that felt loaded. Just a second-floor apartment with pale walls, 2 narrow windows, and the kind of quiet that no longer made my chest tighten. I unpacked slowly. Work shoes by the door, mugs in the cabinet, clean towels folded the way I liked them. It was not much, but every object in that place answered to the same truth. It was mine. On the first Sunday morning there, I sat at the kitchen table with my coffee and opened my budget for the month. Rent, utilities, groceries, savings, then one line lower than the rest. Family, $0. I looked at that number for a long time, not because it felt cold, because it did not. 0 did not mean I had stopped loving them. It meant love no longer got to bill me for silence. Later, I picked up my key ring and saw the old house key still there. The brass was worn smooth around the edges. I held it for a second, then slid it off the ring and dropped it into the junk drawer. Small sound, soft landing, bigger than it looked. Darren's text was still on my phone. I still had not answered. Maybe I would one day. Maybe I would not. Not every door has to be locked forever to be closed for now. I know something now that I did not know when this began. A house can stand for years on guilt, fear, and one person's quiet sacrifice. Home never should. Home should not be the place where love arrives carrying a bill. And if you had been standing where I stood, with that old key in your hand, would you have left one path back open, or chosen the first quiet that finally belonged to you?